Hello and salam everyone. I'm Sophia Bokhari, and though my vocation is teaching, I prefer to think of myself as an explorer of literature. This is because in all my years of teaching, the one true thing that I learned was that whatever I took into the classroom, I came out with much more. That's the magic of teaching literature, the exchange of ideas, the opening of minds, and that literature teaches perennial hope, the opening of hearts, which is empathy. I can honestly say that my students taught me much more than I taught them. Young minds go off at so many tangents once they're nudged. So very humbled and eternally thankful. Springfielders, this one's for you. When the idea of introducing Shakespeare's themes for discussion came up, my choice to pick the first extract was really no choice at all. The Merchant of Venice, Act 4, Scene 1, Portia's speech at the trial of Antonio. Why is that? It's because if I had to choose one thing, as a mother and as a teacher, to give as a gift to my children, it would be an invitation to mercy. And by the way, my forte is classroom teaching, and I'm a total novice at this kind of online communication. So let me begin with a plea for mercy from all of you. I was petrified when the proposal was put before me of that one thing we all fear, I'd become a laughing stock. But then, after some days of pacing and pondering, I said to myself, even if it comes to that, it's not such a bad thing to provide some good cheer and comic relief briefly in these depressing COVID times. After all, this too, being an object of ridicule, shall pass. Today's headline news, tomorrow's Raddi paper. That's the reality behind the delusions of grandeur we all have about ourselves. So let's begin this journey to wherever it leads us. This is how we are going to do it. I'll read out the passage and my interpretation of it, and then we'll invite your opinions, ideas, and questions. At this point, just a suggestion, since you all don't have the text in front of you, if in the course of the hour, a thought or an idea strikes you, put it down in the chat box. Because as we all know, thoughts and ideas have that weird, peculiar habit of taking wing and disappearing. And Shumaila and Musfira, of course, are here to help us with collecting all our thoughts. If we find this first session fruitful, we'll follow up with more picks from Shakespeare, whose words I find universally, timelessly profound. For me, they are like a peace niche, a retreat, comfort food. So let's begin then. Act 4, Scene 1. In defense of Antonio, Portia pleading with Shylock in the court of Venice. The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth like the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesses him that gives and him that takes. 'Tis mightiest in the mightiest. It becomes the throned monarch better than his crown. His scepter shows the force of temporal power, the attribute to awe and majesty, wherein doth sit the dread and fear of kings. But mercy is above this sceptred sway. It is enthroned in the heart of kings. It is an attribute to God himself. And earthly power doth then show like as God's, when mercy seasons justice. Therefore, Jew, though justice be thy plea, consider this, that in the course of justice, none of us should see salvation. We do pray for mercy, and that same prayer doth teach us to render the deeds of mercy. I have spoke thus much to mitigate the justice of thy plea, which, if thou follow, this strict court of Venice must needs give sentence against the merchant there. The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth like the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. Mercy cannot ever be forced. Rain, of course, is a metaphor for divine blessing. Recently, I was attending a Sufi meditation class, and we learned that in the interpretation of what we saw when we went into a deep silence, rain was explained as a sign of divine blessings approaching. God's blessing is a given. But what is this place beneath? In a larger context, it can be the earth, our planet, our home. We are now becoming more and more aware of not taking the rain or divine blessing for granted. Rain washes off of concrete and asphalt, but falling on soil produces more abundance and more beauty. The cruelty that humans are inflicting on the planet is making the verdant greens and the calming blues disappear very quickly under the grays. God gave us the prime colors of beauty right in the beginning, and it's our duty to preserve that beauty. It's an act of mercy. In the micro sense, the place beneath is the human heart, which, when it is open and receptive, absorbs divine benevolence and then, of course, radiates it. There's a spiritual theory that in each of our hearts, God has placed a particle of divine light, or nur as we call it. And with every kind thought or deed, the light expands, till with those closest to God, the heart is absolutely filled with that light. This is what our journey is all about, to make that particle of light grow. But remember, there's also plenty of darkness in our hearts. Remember Lady Macbeth, out damned spot that she could not get rid of because the wickedness grew and grew, and that spot was not a stain on her hands actually, it was a stain on her conscience, it was a stain on her heart that she could not get rid of, right? So our journey in life is all about making the particle of light grow bigger and bigger as each day we move towards more kindness. And when we talk about kindness, for me, the most beautiful kind of kindness, the most beautiful act of mercy is the kindness of strangers. I learned this phrase from the Bible when I was a very young child, and it has stayed with me all these years. And it's a thing with my children and myself. They learned the phrase on my lap and at my knee, and they keep on calling. And the best days for me are when my children call up with a story about the kindness of a stranger. What is this kindness of strangers? It's the random acts of mercy that we come across in our daily lives. It could be at an airport terminal, it could be at a bus station, it could be at a railway station, a shopping mall, on the road, right? So this is an act of kindness, a random act of kindness from somebody who we are never going to see again. I often encounter it on the London buses, that hand that comes out to steady you, that voice that says, "Are you okay, love?" So for me, that's the most beautiful kind of kindness. And I love my children sharing the stories of the kindness of strangers with me. And I do hope that when we start the question and answer session, I do hope many of you will remember the kindness of a stranger, and I'd love to hear that stories. I love stories, so I'd love to hear that story from you when a kindness of stranger touched your life. Mercy is twice blessed. It blesses him that gives and him that takes, but in different ways. The taker is given help and his burden is eased. So his heart fills with gratitude and a surge of positivity flows out to the giver. But the giver, how much more he gains. Therefore, the sequence of the words, it blesses him that gives and him that takes. You know, as a mother, my constant prayer for my children is that they be blessed with a giving hand and a humble heart. Those two go together, because in giving, we must never fall into the trap of condescension and conceit. For what are we when we give? We are the instruments of passing on divine blessing. And that's a humbling honor indeed. If we think that what we give is ours to give, that would be a tragic flaw, that Shakespeare favorite, which would turn us from heroes to villains instantly. As parents, it's our responsibility to inculcate mercy into the character of our children. What's the goal of human civilization? That each new generation evolves into better human beings than its predecessors. And as parents, you all must be experiencing and seeing, when you see your children, instances of them that show that they are better human beings than you. I think that gives you such a sense of fulfillment, and that is surely a job well done if you know that your children are better human beings than you. Teaching begins in the cradle. Science tells us that babies can distinguish between gentle and harsh voices. So make sure to use gentle words around your children, however young they may be. Be a good example. Children are constantly observing and absorbing, and you're their first role model. So be consistent in exhibiting good behavior. You have to practice what you preach. And in the bargain, while teaching kindness, we are reinforcing mercy in our own characters too. And here I'd also like to share, it's so important not only to show good behavior, but also when we slip up, when we commit an act of unkindness that we regret, it's so important to share that with your children also, to show them that they too will slip many times, just like you are. You are all on a journey together. So you are also evolving into better human beings, hopefully. And for parents to admit that they made a mistake or something that they regret, an unkind act that they did, it's very important to share that with your children. Good manners. It saddens me to see how a sense of entitlement has replaced appreciation and gratitude. No one is below please and thank you, however menial the job they're performing for you. Teach your children to respect human dignity. That's a basic entitlement each of us deserve. Parents are such powerful influencers, and we need to use that influence responsibly. Just yesterday, I was reading that schools in Denmark have introduced a mandatory empathy class, and I said, wow, that's such a wonderful thing. It needs to be put in the curriculums globally, because I remember when I was a child, our day at the convent used to start with a period called character building, which later became moral science. And it is a science, it's a skill that we are learning when we are building our characters. And I think all schools need to reintroduce this empathy class or the character building class into their curriculums. Unfortunately, even literature is disappearing from most curriculums because there's just no time to put it in. So yes, moral science, character building, very, very important skills that children have to learn. 'Tis mightiest in the mightiest. What a beautiful line. The crux of power, the strength of power lies in mercy. Our scripture, the Quran, begins with this lesson. The first attributes God wants to be known for are the most benevolent, the most merciful. Then follows mention of His Majesty, that He is the Lord of the Alameen, the universes. So mercy comes first, power second. It's a lesson we all need to inculcate in our daily lives, whatever position of power we may hold. As parents, as children taking care of parents, and especially children taking care of parents, keep in mind, like you are now, they too were once invincible. And you're on the same journey. As partners in life, as employers, as CEOs, ministers, heads of state, power without mercy sets you on the path to ruthlessness. It becomes the throned monarch better than his crown. His scepter shows the force of temporal power, the attribute to awe and majesty, wherein doth sit the dread and fear of kings. Where does strength really lie? In the manifest or in the hidden? Food for thought. When we think of a king or queen, the images that come to our mind are of pomp and splendor, very appealing to the eye. The fanfare of trumpets and cathedral bells ringing, of ermine cloaks and jeweled crowns. But actually, that which is invisible, the heart of the monarch, is what's really important. The rest is foam and froth. We've all been watching The Crown on Netflix recently, and this serves as a good example of the contrast of that which is in the public eye and that which goes on behind closed doors. A story of every home, actually, isn't it? And as we saw, there was plenty of mercilessness running riot in that household. And this thought strikes me many times, and I've talked about it in my classroom also. It's such a tragedy that we save our best behavior for people outside our homes, and we reserve our worst sides for those who love us unconditionally. We show our temper tantrums and our moods and our foul language and our most unkind acts for inside the home, because we take those people for granted, our family, our loved ones. We know that they are going to love us no matter what. And it's so sad that we go through life like this and never give them the credit that they're, or the dignity or the respect that is their due. So that's something I think about very often. What kind of a leader or ruler is most effective? What kind of obedience is longer lasting? Obedience or compliance coming from love is far superior to that coming from fear. In all walks of life, wherever we need cooperation or teamwork, we need to remember that. These lines remind me of another favorite extract from Shakespeare, from Henry VI. My crown is in my heart, not on my head, not decked with diamonds or Indian stone, nor to be seen. My crown is called content. A crown it is that seldom kings enjoy. What a blessing it would be to go through life wearing the crown of contentment. When ugliness takes over residence of the heart, outward beauty becomes worthless. Mercy is an attribute to God Himself. As we discussed earlier, the most powerful qualities of God which inspire us are related to benevolence. The mercy of God is the pinnacle of this quality, the height of its perfection, and the human soul's quest in life is to try and reach closer and closer to this ideal perfection. Imitation is the best form of flattery, and emulation is the best form of worship. An earthly power doth then show likest gods, when mercy seasons justice. It's a great feeling to be right, and it's an even greater feeling to be always right. We all take pride standing up for what we perceive to be right, and surely the world would be in a state of havoc if justice were to cease. But justice is best served blended with empathy. No soul is beyond redemption. We are all fallible creatures, and we only need to stand in another's shoes for a minute before the perspective changes. Remember that last scene in To Kill a Mockingbird, where Scout stands in Boo Radley's porch and looks out at the street from his perspective, or that stolen loaf of bread that caused so much misery in Les Miserables. So it's all relative. The more comfortable we become in our life, the more righteous our sense of justice becomes. Even the court of Venice, arguably, gives out very selective, cruel justice. Because to save his life or property, Shylock will have to give up his religion. And so many would actually maybe prefer me to pick out the passage from Shylock where he defends himself. Hath not a Jew eyes, hands, organs, dimensions, senses, passions, affections? If you prick us, do we not bleed? So for Portia and Antonio and the rest, the court of Venice, bringing Shylock into the fold of Christianity, as it were, is an act of mercy, is an act of charity. But and we all also hear all the time about bringing people into the fold of Islam, and we think that's a very, very kind deed. Whereas in actuality, I find it to be absolute cruelty. Because if it is forced, there's no way that it's an act of charity. So justice actually sees only black and white. But mercy teaches us to perceive that there are many shades between those two. In Act 2, Scene 1, Portia puts this aptly, saying, I can easier teach 20 than to be one of the 20 to follow my own teaching. I always say to my children, it's better to be kind than to be right. We don't have to win every argument. In fact, the very concept of victory and defeat nullifies the purpose of argument. As Socrates and Aristotle and Plato would tell you, are you fighting or are you arguing? Is your intention to reach an amicable conclusion or to make the other person bite the dust? So be very clear what your objective is when you go into an argument. Though justice be thy plea, consider this, that in the course of justice, none of us should see salvation. So many of us are constantly falling into this trap of judgmental conceit. Again, the contrast between the manifest and the hidden. Imagine if all our sins were exposed, our thoughts and actions on public display. We'd have nowhere to hide. That's why we find refuge in another of God's names, which is my favorite one, Satarul Uyub, the one who covers flaws. Another quality to emulate, always cover instead of exposing. Trust me, the satisfaction in covering is much longer lasting than the pleasure in exposing. We do pray for mercy, and that same prayer that teaches us to render the deeds of mercy. Whenever I read these lines, I'm transported back to my childhood. Sibling squabbles, minor trespasses, very, very self-righteous, childish anger. And my mother always saying, Maafi doge nahi to mangoge kaise? Maafi doge nahi to mangoge kaise? Eternal wisdom. As you grow older, you realize that all the annoying things your mom used to say are actually very profound. Though obviously, you have to make that very long journey on that same road she took, balancing, staggering, stumbling, falling, getting back up again, till you realize that most of the time she was right. My mother, the one memory of her that's still a stab in the heart. In her last years, she had Parkinson's disease and began the slow, painful, debilitating journey to losing her movement, losing her independence, and losing herself. So one day I saw her sitting and staring into space, and I asked her, Mom, what are you thinking about? This is what she said. Mere loves gum gaye hain. I can't imagine a loss more terrible, more poignant than that. Mere loves gum gaye hain. So, in case and before I lose my words, I just wanted to reach out and communicate a little of what I've learned in life. May all of you stay blessed, and may all of you stay merciful. As W.H. Auden says, if equal affection cannot be, let the more loving one be me. Thank you everyone for listening, and if you have any questions, or remember that kindness of strangers stories, I would love to hear from you, encounters with kindness. And if you have any questions or would you like to share your thoughts, please, we're open for questions and answers now.
I don't know if you guys would like seeing me or just hearing me and have her pinned on the screen. I'll just unpin her from the screen first. Just give me a second. I'm just as bad with technology. Okay.
You could be first, Henry.
All right. Okay. So guys, if you guys have any questions or anything, I'm just looking at the range of people. I will just put this in gallery mode. So if you guys have any questions, all right. Adil, you have a question. I'll just unmute you, Adil. Okay, I have to ask you to unmute, Adil.
Okay. Fantastic presentation, and
Thank you so much.
wide range of learnings to be had. What I wanted to know was, there was this Shakespeare Society at one time with chapters in Quetta, even Quetta, along with Lahore and Karachi. And if I remember correctly, a professor साहब थे, Karachi University के ही थे, late lamented, he passed away some years back. I'm wondering if that society is still active, or is it gone defunct?
If it's still active, I would really like to be a part of it. I'm not aware of it. And unfortunately, we are all becoming late and lamented now. So that's the tragedy about literature, isn't it? So if anyone is connected to that society, please let me know also and share.
Shakespeare Society of Pakistan के नाम से थी वो. And Professor Rafi, मेरे ख्याल में उनका नाम था. I remember doing his profile for Dawn Review. I'll try and dig it up, because this sort of activity is clearly very desirable. More of it, and I think...
Please do share it.
Sorry?
I said, please do share it with us when you find your article. I would love to read it, and I'm sure many at T2F would want to share with you also. I'm not aware of that society, that it exists now, but if it does, I would love to become part of it. That would be so great. Thank you so much for sharing that.
There is absolutely no problem with you initiating another society, you know. till we find out what happened to that one. You've got a goodly number gathered here today. So maybe it's under the auspices of the T2F, we could start another Shakespeare Society.
That would be wonderful. That would be wonderful indeed. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you so much. We have another person who is raising her hand. It's so ironic. I see hands raised. Oh, hello. Ms. Najris, I would ask you to unmute. I think you have unmuted yourself. So you have the floor.
Hi, delightful to hear you, sister. But I was just going to ask that this is very nice. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and quoting some Shakespeare that goes along with those thoughts, and coming up with a kind of reformative movement from Shakespeare, you know, through Shakespeare.
Yes.
So maybe that's something to come up with, and especially in times like this, to have a kind of, you know, and I know you can do it only, is go through a lot of the Shakespeare, you know, wealth that you have, to extract things that can actually become part of today's being and are so applicable in the times we're living in. So I think that's the most important thing. Is literature is beautiful, but unfortunately our minds are so clogged with day-to-day issues these days and things that we've never encountered before. So it has a lot more impact when you have been able to connect the dots and say, okay, don't forget the literature, but these are wise words that we can apply to every situation, and especially the one that we're going through now. So I think that's commendable, And I think that effort to maybe have a, a whole list of such Shakespeare excerpts that you can actually connect in today's world. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes,
So not
that's
a
what I
question,
think
really.
also. Yes, thank you. I think that also, and I was just discussing this with Chumaila and Musfira earlier, that it only makes sense. The classics are classics, of course, but they only make sense when we make them relevant to our lives today, right? So the children also pick up and absorb and learn from experience, but they can connect it to, if they can connect it to their lives, what's going on around them, that's when, they really become interested in it. So of course we have to connect to what's going on around us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your input. I guess I saw another hand raised. I'm so happy to see people's videos. It makes it so much easier than seeing that little tiny hand on the corner.
Yes.
You have the floor as well. I'll just mute myself and then you can ask your question. You're muted.
Hi, were you talking about my hand? Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to build on the last intervention. And you mentioned Mother about empathy in your chat. And so like, and you mentioned curriculums had like a focus on empathy before, which they don't have anymore. And I think it's much more needed in these times than before, because more and more we are surrounded by, that we live with people who are very different from us, and empathy is the thing that kind of binds us together. So I think it would also be an idea to dig out excerpts from Shakespeare that could build an entire course on empathy, and whether it's in schools. I know that it's very politicized curriculums in countries, national curriculums, so we may not make it there, but in organizations like T2F we could have a session that sort of focuses on empathy, and it could have excerpts from different plays that speak to different aspects of empathy, for example.
Yes, that's a great idea, and it's something that I would love to do. So T2F, it's up to you. I don't know if I can reach all the schools who would introduce in their curriculum, but definitely this could be a platform for introducing that. And I just think it's so necessary in today's world to build the bridges of empathy. That's the most important construction work that needs to be done.
I guess I'm registering all of these questions as well. When we will conclude, I would have a few more things to share. But in that, I think I can positively let everyone know that when we first started talking to Ms. Sophia, our intention was to host such workshops and also webinars online for people, so that we can have it as an ongoing webinar or workshop series on its own for people too. So I guess let's see how that goes. This is a one-off thing for now. I mean, this session was a one-off session, but we'll plan ahead more of these sessions too. Anyone else who has their hands raised? I see another emoji hand by Ms. Nargis. So I'll just mute myself and then.
Yeah, no, thank you. I was just continuing on the previous thought and what Kimti just said. So I'm just saying that this is, there was also versions which I see our children don't get to read really, because one, there's so much to read, and then Shakespeare becomes a little difficult for children really. So, we used to have short stories from Shakespeare and Dickens and all those writers where as children, we could read the simplified versions of those stories also, because there's always a lesson to tell in those stories. I mean, I think you're a good writer. Maybe you should consider taking up something like that to make those stories up and bring them up. And then, of course, as we were talking about emotions and empathy and how we live with different people. So to a certain level, these great writings become above our color and our race, and Shakespeare being Christian, we take it away from religion. So, religion actually adds a good and a bad side to anything that you bring up, because it closes down the audiences. So I would say that we need to open it up with no religious or color or belongings to different, sects or
Yes.
parts of.
True. True. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. We have Mr. Mazhar who also has a question. Please, if you can unmute.
I just want to add to that, we do have Tales from Shakespeare by Charles and Mary Lamb.
Yes.
It is in story form. We studied that in school. And then there's Oxford Progressive Readers for the very young. Stories they're already there. That's what I just want to mention that.
Yes, you're right. They are there. They're still there. They're in circulation. And the only thing is that schools are now putting literature aside, because in my personal experience also, I've talked to people about this, and they say they cannot fit it into the timetable, which is, I mean, it's a real tragedy, I guess, because, from the beginning of time, storytelling is the best way to build character, right? In each following generation, storytelling is the best way to build character of the future generations. So if we are going to discard literature from our curriculum, I think that's a real tragedy. And it's not just for the O levels I'm talking about, because initially when I started talking to Shumaila, my idea was to get a circle of 20 children at a time and read them out the abridged version of the story and talk to them, connecting it to their lives. So that was mainly the idea of the Shakespeare Hour. So you're right, those books are there, but we need as parents also to, maybe if it's not in the curriculum, bring those books home and introduce our children to them. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Sorry, I was just rambling on while being on mute. So I believe there's another note here that Sophia left us in the chat. Would you like me to read it out, Ms. Sophia?
Yes, of course.
All right. It says that inside our households, we do expect to be understood, and when that expectation is broken, we lash out. So a lack of communication and acceptance becomes the culprit. Also, I believe that all relationships are fundamentally conditional. The condition may be silly or rational, but there must be some form of exchange. That was the note by Safir. I think Safir is still with us.
Okay, Safir, no, I was just talking about the contrast. So for me, that contrast is a little sad, because usually we reserve our best behavior for outside the home, and we bring in the worst side of ourselves inside. Of course, every home is different and also is similar in many ways. So, I just wanted to point out on that it's good to bring kindness and try and initiate kindness and try and maintain kindness inside the family too. And, when we talk about being misunderstood or lack of communication, well, we need to open those channels of communication and, step out of the boundaries and talk to each other. And then maybe, it'll make us feel better also.
We have another note. My eyes are just like, we have another note by Mr. Muzammil. I can read it out if you want me to. May I read it out, Ms. Sophia?
Yes, yes, of course.
Right. It says, T2F, thank you for arranging this session. I was introduced to Shakespeare back in 2002 by Mrs. Bokhari only. Was great yet nostalgic hearing her speak about Shakespeare again. This should happen at least every month or once in 2 months. Next time, please host this live on Facebook for a wider audience, as people skip out when asked for registrations. Okay. So thank you so much
for you,
that.
Shumaila.
Yes, we wanted this to be a registered thing so that we can actually engage audience members. We do keep live sessions on Facebook around causes and literature and other conversations, but I guess the only reason we kept this registered was to have this sort of an intimate setting where there are people on screen who have registered, so that we can all join in, have our cup of coffee in our hands, not have our videos on and just listen. And yeah, I saw the mugs. I saw the tea mugs everywhere. And just by the way, I also had one. So
Thank
I
you
guess,
so much,
yeah.
Muzammil. I was hoping some of my Springfielders would join in, because it's a walk down memory lane, isn't it? For me also, when I'm talking Shakespeare, of course, I'm thinking of all of you and sometimes imagining all of you sitting in front of me also. And believe me, the happiest moments in my life are when out of the blue, a message pops up from some Springfielder saying, ma'am, this happened in my life. And I thought of that literature lesson, which even I don't remember, but they remember it. And that's just so gratifying to know as a teacher that it's something that they remember. It helped them become a better human being, act in kinder ways, and it was good for them. So, so grateful for that. Thank you, Muzammil.
There's another thing, Miss Sophia. Somebody says,
Yes.
I think this is Mr. Adil. They say that suggest the host to float T2F Shakespeare Society and enlist all present here today. All of those in favor, you can just say aye.
Come on, everyone. Sign up.
All right. That's
Thank you so much.
Ms. Pushpa Shrazia had a question. She raised her hand.
Okay, Ms. Pushpa, if you have a question, I'll just mute myself and then you can. If you could just unmute yourself.
Yes, she did.
I was letting it pass and I'd asked Sophia the question at another point. But having said that, I think you all speak about literature and its importance in schools. I think the importance of it in professional colleges, in character building of, people with different professions. And I sincerely agree that stories, like pictures have 1,000 words, stories have so many nuances, and it kind of relates to life. So I just wanted to say it's not only for the ones going to school. It is, I think its weightage or value is much more when you are in a professional, field. And I think it builds you. So I just wanted to give that comment.
Wow, my horizons are broadening more and more with each comment. So there's a lot that I have to do after this session, Shumaila. Thank you, Bushra. Yes, I agree with you totally. And, it's surprising sometimes when you encounter people and you think, oh, this is an adult and could do with a literature class or two to build up the mercy and kindness, right? I agree with you totally. Thank you.
All right, I will take this time to ask you, Ms. Sophia, how do you want to go about it now? We can register a few more questions if you would like. I would just ask the audience members again, if you have a question, raise your tiny emoji hands on the side. Or you can just raise your hands by video. If you have any questions, I'll just register them right now. I'll give you, okay, Ms. Ambreen, you have a question?
Yeah, so can I just speak? Is that okay? Yeah. So, Miss Sophia, what is, can you hear me? What is your favorite Shakespearean novel of all the novels he's written?
Amreen, it's so difficult to choose because in all of them, there are parts of, there's the speeches that I love most. But my favorite, I think, is Hamlet because it's such a psychological play and about the darkness that exists in all of us. And, it's a beautiful play for me. And then King Lear, I just told you about my mother and, that King Lear always haunts me about. After I became a mother, I think King Lear became one of the favorites because you keep thinking about the filial relationships and how they develop and, what is love really. So King Lear and Hamlet, I would pick as my personal favorites. What's yours?
Hamlet.
Which one is yours?
What I did. Hamlet.
Yes.
And, actually my favorites are the ones I did for my O-levels and A-levels. So A-levels, it was Hamlet, and O-levels, it was Romeo and Juliet. And I think it was learning it in a classroom that made them special.
So, of course, you share with other children and everybody.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So, yes. Yeah. Romeo and Juliet, of course, also, It's a beautiful play, not just the romance, but so many intricate relations, interwoven, all kinds of relationships. So that's why Shakespeare is my favorite thing to teach, because we just see the characters all around even now. We can identify with the characters, we can see the characters all around us. So that's why it's it stood the test of time, I think.
True.
Thank you so much, Amri.
We have,
and Shumaila, if I may, at this point, I just wanted to, my sister had said about, or Narjis had said about religion being brought into the thing. I just wanted to say that consciously, I use the word God, right, when I was talking about spirituality, because I do believe that not only all religions, all virtue does not belong to any one faction of society, right? But for me, this first session was what my interpretation of the lines was. And what she said is so true, that it transcends all wisdom, all virtue, transcends, religions, or, any one faith is not what we're talking about here, because all the paths lead to the same, the divine light that we are trying to expand in our hearts, right? So I think it's about that. And I remember, my daughter, she had gone, the youngest one, when she went to college, and I sort of learn from my children all the time. And this is one instance where what she said, I found it was so true, because I was talking to her about, my religious something. And she said that, Mom, I think atheists are much better than us, because they're not doing it for, reward or punishment. They are doing good deeds just because they think it makes them, it makes them feel good. And I totally agree with her, because yes, it's in a way superior to what the good deeds we are doing, maybe subconsciously all the time thinking about where the good deed is going to lead us to punishment or to reward, right? But yes, atheists or people who have no one faith, right? They are doing things because they think that it's the right thing to do, and that's actually why it should be done. I totally agree with that.
thank you so much for that. We have Sophia.
Nobody shared a story about the kindness of strangers.
I think we can entertain some of those. We have Sophia raising their hand. So, Sophia, if you could just unmute yourself. Hello.
Ms. Bokhari, I have a question relating to the propagation of literature and how we could do that. I'm actually 24 years old. I'm doing my undergrad right now, and I've had small stints with literature in the capacity of learning it for my A-level exam. I had English language, so I didn't study literature purely, but my teacher, I mean, in a classroom setting, was kind enough to introduce me to the works of Orwell, the works of Shakespeare to an extent. So I began reading then when I was, I think, this is four-ish years ago. And I see what you say when you say that, children these days are very disconnected. However, on the flip side, I see that myself and younger people, they are easily, they're keen and conducive to absorbing information through memetics, through memes, and smaller chunks of information rather than going through a novella or a large book. So perhaps me being in technology and being a software engineer with, my heart, or at least a big part of it, that relates to literature, and I guess what it does for us in terms of making us more empathetic and kind, and I guess just broadening our horizons, letting us live through the lives of the past. What could we do to bridge this gap, or could somehow can these giant works be broken into parts or messages that, are more accessible to the younger generation or to schools?
Yes, I'm sure, Safi, that something could be done. Like you could pick extracts and you could make short videos on it or memes on it.
Right.
Or, but then maybe you could collaborate with somebody who has studied literature in detail and could build up a team like that. And I agree with you that people have shorter maybe don't have shorter attention spans, but they do have less time because life is much more busy now. So your idea is a very good one. And maybe you could collaborate with either a literature teacher or somebody who is willing to give up that time and delve into, different books and bring up ideas for you to then transform into this kind of thing on media where you could reach out to young people.
And I think that I've observed, because I am the eldest of all of my cousins and my siblings, I've observed that children are very conducive to discussions like these. So if any one of my 12-year-old cousin would be, or brother or sister would have been made aware of this discussion, they would not have read Shakespeare, but they would have sat down and listened to all of you, and they would have maybe even partook in the discussion, said a few, shared a few ideas.
Yeah, it's always beautiful to hear the new ideas because you are from another world. I'm from another world actually, and when the two worlds meet, it's so beautiful. So this was my whole purpose in discussing and putting forward this idea about the Shakespeare Hour, because in my imagination, the dream was that I have a circle of 12-year-olds, 12-year-olds sitting in front of me, and I'm discussing and reading out the abridged versions of Shakespeare and discussing with them. Because obviously they are so bright, the children nowadays are so bright because they have access to so much information and they're processing it all the time. And so they have so much more to teach us also actually, right? So that would be a great idea if you could collaborate.
Maybe adding pictures and creating something along the lines of a comic book or adapting things into smaller versions or something along the lines of that.
Yes, so
Thank you very much again. And I would take 2 minutes more of your time to comment on what you had said. The reason I wrote my comment was to understand if that is the actual reason why this disparity or contrast happens between how we behave with the people that are inside our homes versus treating people outside our homes better, perhaps. Why do you think that this happens? Is it the way we're raised? Is it something that is context dependent, or is it just general among human beings?
I think taking things for granted is a common flaw that we all have, right? And in our subconscious minds, we know that people who love us, or let's say family, are always going to be there, right? No matter what. You fight with your siblings, mother, father, whoever, but it's going to blow over in a few days' time.
The inevitability of things becoming okay.
So, you know that they're going to be there for you, and therefore you let loose in front of them. But I just find it sad. That's why I just brought it up, because I observe it and I talk about it in my literature class also. And, I talked about it to my daughter-in-law once. She's a banker. And I said, Ayla, I read a long time ago when I was a teenager, I read this article in Reader's Digest, and it said, treat your husband or wife like your best client. At least they deserve that courtesy.
Right.
And I said, it stayed with me, and it's actually so true. I mean, I don't follow it also, but it's so true. That's a lifelong client, right? Or clients that you have in your home. But we are not treating them the way that we treat our clients, right?
Here's to treating them like clients, I guess. Or a bit better.
It's a partnership that lasts for life, right? but we don't treat them with that respect. It's sad.
Thank you very much for your answer.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for that great idea. So I'm looking forward to your Shakespeare comic books.
All right. Let's see what we can do.
Thank you so much for that. I see so many hands now. So many hands being raised. I guess we'll entertain the last few comments for this session. And then, Sophia, you and I have a bit of talking to do after the session. I'm planning ahead.
Sure.
All right. So who shall I entertain first, Ms. Keemti or Mr. Hani? So any one of you. All right. Ms.
I'll
Keemti.
go. He just thought I was saying hi, so I don't think he was raising his hand. Is that right, Dad? Yes. Okay. I just wanted to thank Safir actually for bringing up really good points. And I just wanted to push our dear speaker. And also I see another distinguished literature teacher now has joined us, Batul Ahmed. With these two in the room, I think we should take up Safir on this idea of this comic book. But I think the first step is for the literature teachers to identify excerpts that would translate well into an illustration or other ways, or a meme or whatever, because it's true that I think we've been talking about that there are many lessons to share and we need to make it more accessible. But I think the first step is for the ones that have the wealth of, Shakespeare knowledge, to identify the ones that could be translated into illustrations or other graphic forms that could then be produced and circulated widely. So I just wanted to add that.
So yes, so Safir, till the vaccine comes to Pakistan, I'm available. Anytime you want to collaborate. I'm a bit of a gypsy. I take off when the vaccine comes. I will not possibly be available, but seems like a long time till then. So
we could potentially, I think this is not going to be something that can be done by a group of small people. If there were to, or well, if you have more hands doing the work, community behind this, it becomes easier for it to be executed. So I think this is, I guess, what it would entail is having the expertise of people like you who know the work intimately, and then mobilizing or enabling children or young people who can, would be willing to for example, draw, or someone to design these graphics, and then, incentivize it in a certain way. And I'm sure that there would be lots of people willing to do this for, let's say, university projects. So we should have, I mean, if taken seriously, this is not, beyond, it's something that can be, it's not unreasonable to do. It's very, very possible and very doable. It's just a matter of spending a little time gathering, I guess, like-minded people on a platform, and then we could potentially, I think the person who was just speaking, I'm sorry, I do not know how to pronounce her name, so I will not butcher it. She said that it's important to identify. Oh, okay, sorry. So it's important to identify, I think, the excerpts that are relevant or important, or carry messages that can then be transformed into graphic works that then, I think, would somehow serve or would become motivation for these kids or young people to be part of the venture, I guess. Or
yeah, I think it's something worth pursuing, Safir, and I'm certainly going to think about it, and maybe
sure. I will leave my email or some way to get in touch with you guys if you ever need my help, or
thank you.
If I can find people that would be involved. Sure.
Thank you so much.
And in fact, I can actually speak to the literary society in my university. I go to FAST. Oh. So we have a group of around, I think, 30, 40 people, out of which 20-ish are very active. So we could potentially, I mean, we're a computer science university, so everyone generally knows how to design and stuff. But well, let's whenever you guys are ready, we can, I guess, create an event around this virtually, and then see where we can go.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Safir. We'll certainly think about it and start looking for things that could be converted into appealing
Sounds
ideas
great.
for children.
It's exciting. Yeah.
So go.
I'm so sorry. I was mute because I was letting everyone hear and speak.
Yes,
we just take one more question by this person who just shifted and came onto the screen. On the listener's screen. Yes, hello. I'll entertain your question, then I'll just move towards ending the session, if that's all right with all of you.
Looking good, Nargis.
I've been keeping a beard. I have more of just a comment along the lines of the last two questions. मैं बस ये चाह रहा था कि we need to adapt these stories for our own place and our own society, and sometimes Mercutio is difficult to get at. तो क्यों ना शेक्सपियर और तीन तलवार की कहानियां आप लोग इकट्ठी करें और हमारे साथ शेयर करें.
जरूर अडेप्ट करना चाहिए. Life is all about adapting to different circumstances, and of course we have to move with the times, and why not? That's a very good idea.
क्योंकि ये बहुत एक अच्छा जेंटल रिमाइंडर था कि काइंडनेस अपनी जिंदगी में लानी चाहिए, लेकिन एक लिटरेचर की क्लास को काइंडनेस सिखाने से बहुत वक्त ज़ाया करने की क्या जरूरत है. वो तो सारे ही पहले ही उनके दिल पिघले हुए होते हैं. तो जिन तक आपकी कहानियां पहुंचानी है उनको किसी और तरीके से पहुंचाएं.
This is a very valid point.
बस इतना ही.
Achha, so we'll just explain. We'll just take your comment to Zaira.
Sure, thank you. So Sophia Auntie, really appreciate you sharing all of your thoughts and reminding us how important it is to be connected with Shakespeare. I think listening to the audience here has been refreshing, because there's a lot of negative news around what's happening in the world, and this is a reminder of ways we can still, connect and be human and have empathy. And I'm not going to go on further thanking you, but I think just going back to the comment that Safir made, it reminded me that when I was younger and taking literature classes, the biggest barrier was Old English, because already in a classroom where we are trying to get better at, writing and reading English, Old English becomes a barrier in understanding the key messages of Shakespeare. So making accessibility through graphics will actually help people connect with literature, and also just remind us to continue finding, visuals and other ways of taking the key messages and important life lessons without feeling like we have to really go deep into subject matter and not be able to understand through some of the barriers. And it just reminded me of that moment when, in 7th grade or 8th grade, I didn't quite understand the meaning of studying literature or Shakespeare and Shakespeare in English, which was not easy to translate. I think there's a lot of benefit to that, because it also teaches you the power of language and how the choice of words can impact people, emotions, and convey messages in a different way. But given the wealth of knowledge that people like you and other literature teachers have had on our lives and have impacted students, I think it's important to continue passing on that wealth of knowledge to us and reminding us to value the treasures that literature, legacies have left behind for us. So thank you for the talk, and also for volunteering your time, and hopefully, through the combination of T2F, Karachi Literature Festival, and other ways, there is definitely an appetite and a yearning from our generation to want to continue connecting. So now we're looking at you guys to help us bridge that gap. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Ayla. And yes, people do have a problem with Old English, but I think it's more like a mental barrier that children have. Because when I started teaching to class 7, We were teaching the abridged version, and then of course in class 8 and 9 we moved on to the actual plays. And I always tell my children, don't worry about the language. I'm here to facilitate you to understand what the meaning behind the words is. And then once the meaning is explained, the language itself becomes very clear to the children. And then the beauty of the words, the cadence of the lines, you know, the rhythm, I think that beauty, to absorb that beauty of literature, of the written word, you know, that is so important to develop mentally or intellectually or whatever you call it. But every person, even for Urdu literature, I just find it so sad that there's no Urdu literature being taught anymore. You know, we've lost our language. That's such a terrible loss, that we have lost our Urdu language, because we are now in O levels teaching just you know, a comprehension passage, a composition to write, and that's about it. You know. So it's so important to know the language of our parents, and you know, our native language, and learn the poetry in that, and appreciate the novels in that. And I just feel that for me, you know, words floor me. The beauty of words, just I would just read a line and I can sit and stare into space for 15 minutes after that, because I'm just so struck by that line, you know. So I think it's so important to impart that to our children. And yes, graphics and all also helps, but giving them the beauty of words and the appreciation of beauty of words, I think that's also very important. And we need, of course, good literature teachers for that. And teachers have to learn also as students to be able to reach that level where they'll be able to impart that to the kids. Right? Thank you so much, Ayla.
Yeah, I think it's enough
Yes.
to pique the interest, similar to, you know, all the Sufi, the Rumi kind of quotes that have taken over
Yes.
a lot of social media.
Yes.
And then our generation is interested in wanting to study Sufism. So it's enough to pique the interest to then get people to come and appreciate and,
Yes.
you know, spend more
Yes,
time.
that was my idea about floating the Shakespeare Hour, because I wanted to do that exactly, you know, pique the interest of the children and get them in once, and then they'll want to come again and again, right? So then
So
expand
Ayla,
the circle.
sorry,
Yes,
I'm
yes.
interjecting.
No, not
if
at
I
all.
may. So Ayla, yeah, so somebody has to start. So I'm in Washington, D.C., and I think I have Nigar here for the last 20 years, as long as I've been here, or 21 years. We do an Urdu class on Mondays of poetry, and you can take Iqbal and then go on Iqbal for a few sessions, a few weeks, and then go take Ghalib and go Ghalib a few weeks, and then take Rumi, and then you connect the thread. So somebody has to take the initiative. There are so many people who want to do this. And, you know, I was trying to tell Sophia on chat also that she has no excuse that she might be a gypsy. Gypsies have no homes, and so do none of us have homes. Our home is the internet. So you have no excuse to say whether you're in some part of the world, you're still connected. So I'm sure that wherever you go, your loved ones will provide you with the internet, which will allow us to get to you. So maybe start
There's no
something,
escape
Ayla.
now.
Yeah, there's no escape. So a weekly or a monthly session, with whether it's going to be Shakespeare, or later on you can bring somebody else besides Shakespeare once you've had enough of Shakespeare. You know, that's something that can be an ongoing thing. And I'm giving you my example sitting in DC, 21 years, and there is Urdu Shairi. And there's Urdu Shairi for new ones and Urdu Shairi for people who are really into it. So there's different sessions, but somebody has to volunteer to take over and organize. People join. You don't even have to organize anymore. It just happens. And then people who will be the lead in you know, sort of facilitating, and the person who's most knowledgeable, like Sophia here. Just an idea.
Yeah, so when we started, we were actually not sure at all, Shumaila and me, whether how many people will actually be interested in it. And we've been overwhelmed actually with the response. So definitely that shows that people are interested, and we're going to perhaps continue with something like this in future also. Thank you everyone.